Today we launch a new series, and when I love teaching in series, actually the rhythm of the ministry in the past has been to do shorter series, typically about 5 to 8 week series, 5 week to 8 week series, and we just had a unique thing in that we taught through the book of Luke, and that took 3 years. But this series that we're launching today is a little bit shorter than that. It's 6 weeks, but I'm excited about it. And just so you understand, when I teach a series, the reason that I love it so much is it allows me to teach on a topic and really to go much deeper. Because if I'm just teaching on an individual topic, I have one Sunday to cover a lot of information. But when we spread it out over 6 weeks, it allows me to kind of hyper-focus in on different points that I want to connect. But so that you understand the rhythm of it, that you can picture the next 6 weeks as one long sermon. So this is a 4.5-hour sermon over the next 6 weeks. And the reason I say that is today is the intro. Today, I am introducing a concept, and I want to warn you, I'm going to create a tension. I'm going to frustrate you today. I'm going to depress you today. I'm not going to give you any solution or answers, and we're going to send you home, okay? And the reason I tell you that is I think most weeks you're used to me bringing it back home and giving you the resolution, and here's the answer that you need, and then we go home and we feel empowered. This series is an empowering series, but today is just the intro. And so I want to create that tension, and I just want to kind of prep you ahead of time so that you know what's going to happen. And I get teased a lot because when I teach, I'm always like, it doesn't matter what series I'm teaching, I'm like, I am so excited over the series. But do you know why I tell you that? Because I really am excited for the series. I love teaching, but I believe that the Word of God changes people's lives. It is the foundation of my belief system. Honestly, if I did not believe that, I wouldn't waste people's time on Sunday. I wouldn't even do this job. But I believe the Word of God changes lives. So every single series is one that I believe has the potential to change people's lives. But I think this series that we're about to teach is uniquely designed to change lives because of how practical it is. I think this series, if you will cooperate in the process, and as I would just say, work the system, all the tools that we're giving you, I believe it has the potential to radically change your lives. This series is one that's going to deal with relational health and mental health and emotional health and financial health and physical health. And if you will cooperate in the process, I believe your life will change. And just to kind of give you some practical things, we always are stressing, become a part of a Connect group. Again, it's because this is what we believe. This system, being connected with other Christians and partnering together, we believe that's how God designed us to be changed. And so some of the things that we've done as a staff to prepare is we created these packets that we're going to give out to every single person that's in a Connect group. But this is more than just a gift. So there's a cool pen and a bag that's in there. But in this, you're going to have a journal where you can chart out the things that God's going to teach you over the next 6 weeks. There's also this that will give you things every single week to do, practical things to take the truths from Sunday and apply it more specifically to your lives. On top of that, there's another resource packet that's going to give you some tools so that you can start working on a budget for your finances, start to evaluate your time management and some other stuff. But these are resources that are only available to our Connect groups because, again, we believe that life change happens when you're in purpose relationships. So I'm going to plug it one more time. Today is the final day to get connected in groups and actually party with us tonight at the tailgate party. It's going to be outside. It's going to be a lot of fun. But even if you're afraid for the future, just sign up for one of the 6-week groups. Become a part of it because I believe if you do this, this can radically change your life. And here's what I'll say. I'll just say this bluntly. The information that I'll be teaching over the next 5 weeks after today is stuff I wish I would have learned at an earlier age. I'm 38 years old, and I wish I would have known this when I was 20. I wish I would have known this when I became a pastor. I wish I would have known this when I first got married. Because the truth is that I went down paths that were very destructive in my life. I created unsustainable rhythms in my life. And if I would have known these things when I was 20, I would have been a happier person. I would have had a better marriage. I would have been a better father 12 years ago when we had our first son. And so now I don't think it's too late for all of us, but I'll just say if we will, over the next 6 weeks, be committed to come to church on Sunday, to get a part of a group, I believe your life can change. And so I hope that you take my words to heart and respond to it. So here's what I want you to do. Grab a Bible. If you don't have a Bible, there's some located under the seats in front of you, and there's 2 passages of Scripture I want you to turn to. The first one's in the Old Testament, just about midway through your Bible. It's Proverbs 22, and you can put a finger there. I'm going to be there in a few minutes, and there's 2 verses we're going to look at there from Proverbs 22, and then the other is in the New Testament, John 10:10. It's Proverbs 22 and John 10:10. So as we begin today, I just want to acknowledge something. I am not by nature a conspiracy theorist. So I'm just not really wired that way. How many of you are? How many of you love a good conspiracy theory? So a few of you do. Yeah, hands up. Okay. And some of you just don't trust me enough to raise your hand on that. Well, anything, this is conspiracy. But I'm not by nature a conspiracy theorist. I mean, I think we landed on the moon. Some of you don't. I think the world is round. Some people think it's flat, which I just found out this year. I didn't know that was a real thing, but it is. I don't believe that there's aliens. I just don't. But you want to know something kind of fascinating? When it comes to Bigfoot, I literally have 3 staff members that absolutely believe that Bigfoot is real. And we had a discussion about it. So I trust those 3, so it's settled in my mind. Bigfoot is real, okay? No conspiracy there. So I don't believe naturally, I'm just not naturally wired toward conspiracy theories, but the truth is that I am a seeker of truth. I am by nature a skeptic. So if you come to me and you want to tell me your point of view, I love discussions, I love hearing it, but I need to hear your reasoning. I need to hear the proof. I love statistics. I love studies. I love that whole process because in my life, I value the pursuit of truth. And so I'm constantly evaluating things. I think this is one of the reasons why I'm able to communicate the way that I do and teach the way that I do is because I love diving into the Word of God and seeking out truth because I love communicating it, and I love when other people respond to truth. But for me in my own life, I don't just take things at face value. I want to think about it. I want to discuss it. And for me, I love having my mind changed. I think that's a lost art in our culture. I think as a culture, we are too easy to figure out one belief system and then just kind of dig in, and we want to argue, and we never want to change our minds. But I'll tell you, I love it when someone can change my mind. Now, that said, I don't always love it initially, especially when it's my wife. You know, it's like that tension when you have to admit you're wrong. You guys know what I'm talking about? It's like, do you guys have those moments where you're arguing, and then midway through, you know you're wrong? You guys know what I'm talking about? How many of you just keep arguing? You're like, I've done it so much, I've gone this far so much, so here we go. Anyone that way? Yeah, you're not going to admit to it. Some of you admit to it, but I hate that moment. I'm like, I'm right. Oh, no, I'm wrong. And it's like, oh. And then you admit it in the middle of the argument. Okay, you're right. And then they think you're playing some game. You guys know what I'm talking about? Like, they look at you like, what do you mean I'm right? And you're like, you're right. And it's like, okay. I don't even know how to do it. When Mary, that one time Mary admitted it to me. I'm just kidding. See, she's not here at the service either. Things I'll say in the second service that I won't say in the third. But no, anyway, so I love the pursuit of truth. And in my own life, and I think you're wired like me. So when I admit this, I think you're wired similarly. I want to be healthy. I mean, I really do in my life. I've experienced unhealth in my life, my own way of living, and it's destructive. And so I want to be healthy. So I put a lot of energy toward health. I put a ton of energy in my life toward spiritual health. It's the reason why I pray and I seek God and I study His Word and I worship and I'm a part of purpose relationships. It's because I want to be spiritually healthy. But the truth is I also want to be physically healthy. I work out 5 days a week at least, and I eat less stupid than I did before. Not super healthy, but just less stupid than I was before. But I want to be physically healthy. Do you know that I also want to be relationally healthy? I put a lot of energy toward having relational health. I put a ton of energy toward my marriage. I put a ton of energy toward my friendships. I'm constantly evaluating how I communicate to people, how I lead as a pastor, because, again, I just want to experience health in my life. I also want to be mentally and emotionally healthy. That's why I go to a Christian counselor every single week, because I believe in counseling. And I have enough in my head that I need help. Do you guys have in your head? You guys know what I'm talking about when I say that? It's just my own thoughts, my own weird way of thinking, and it's good to process that. For me, my opinion is you need a Christian counselor because I want a biblical perspective. But I enjoy that process where they're explaining something. And you're like, yeah, that makes sense. So the reason I say all that is not to lift myself up, but I'm just saying I want to be healthy. I want to know what truth is, and I think you're wired very similar to me. So all that said, I do believe that there is a legit conspiracy against us. I believe our culture is set up in opposition to our mental health. And I think there's a mindset that has invaded our culture that impacts every aspect of our lives. And I think it can be summarized in 3 words. More is better. I think this simple message is quite possibly the most destructive message that we are being taught in our lives. More is better. More is better than less. If you can have one thing, 2 things is better. If you can have 1 scoop of ice cream, 2 scoops is better. If you can have 1 pair of shoes, 2 pairs is better. 5 is even better than that. 15 is really getting good. And about 25 pairs of shoes, it's amazing. How many of you shoe people are in here? Come on. Yeah. It was like me and like 47 ladies. That's right. I'm all right. I love shoes, all right? But we have it in our mindset that more is better. And even as I say that, here's what I'm suspecting. Some of you are thinking, no, Matt, that's not a conspiracy. That's true. I think we've so bought into it that we just assume, no, that's better. Why wouldn't more be better? I mean, why not have an abundance? And so the idea that less could actually be better for us is very difficult for us to understand. But I don't think it even just stops here. It's not just simply the concept of more, it's the concept of better. That we don't just need more stuff, we need better stuff. And so I'd say it this way, more better stuff is better than just more stuff. And for those of you that love the English language, you hate that sentence, right? There probably should be a comma somewhere in there, but I couldn't figure it out, so that's what you get, all right? But we have it in our minds. More, it's not just more, it's that we need better, constant improvement. Newer stuff is better. So I don't just need a house, I need a newer house. I don't just need a car, I need a newer car. I don't just need clothes, I need newer clothes and more of them. And so this is a mindset that we all buy into in our lives. And I want to stop and say something. The things I'm going to address today, even though my tone sounds like I'm attacking it, I want you to understand, I'm not saying every single thing that I say today is a bad thing. What I'm trying to get us all to understand is just to get on the same page of understanding how we've all been taught this message. And the reason that we've been taught this message, and this is really where the conspiracy is, the reason that we've been taught this message is there is a thought behind our culture where all of our culture, so our culture is the shaper of our values, unfortunately, for many people, unless you have faith. Our culture shapes values, our culture shapes our goals and our perspective, the desires of our lives, and our entire culture is shaped in the pursuit of one thing. Anyone want to guess what that is? Money. Our culture wants our money. Every single TV show, every single movie, every single magazine, every single book, every single website, all of it is sustained by money. They need finances in order to sustain and continue to create content. And so the only way they get that is if they get money. Every store you go into, obviously, what does a retailer want? They want your money. So our entire culture is shaped by an industry that needs your money in order to continue. So as a result, in order to get your money, they have to convince you that your life is missing something important. And so what you need in order to be healthy is money. That you need stuff. That you need to accumulate more and more stuff for your life. And so we're taught this message. We don't just need some stuff, we need newer, we need bigger, we need better. And so we pursue it, and we don't just need a vacation, we need a big vacation, we need an exotic vacation. We don't just need this house that meets all of our needs, we need a bigger house. And you know how I know this is true? Because I'm the same way. Years ago when we first moved here, Mary and I bought a house. It was just Mary and me. This house was big enough for both of us. At the time, it was 2 bedrooms and unfinished upstairs that we would later go on to finish, but it was bigger. It was a nice house. We loved the house. But then we started adding people to it, consistently even. Every 2 years, we had another person that we added to our home, and it started to feel smaller to us, and so we went and were able to buy a bigger home. And actually, the home that we bought was over twice the size of our previous home. And when we moved into it, it felt like so big, it was almost a little bit ridiculous to us. Like we could not believe, and we thought, we will never need more space than this. It's double the size of our previous home, and it just seems so big, and what a blessing. I mean, God gave us this incredible deal. If you've never heard that testimony of mine, I mean, God just supernaturally blessed us with this house. It was incredible. You know what I'm going to do this year? I'm putting an addition on my house. and I know it's a weird way to start a message on this, okay, because you think I'm contradicting myself. But there's just a part of us that not only do we add people, but those people keep getting bigger. And in our minds, we feel like we need more space, and this is a mindset. And again, I'm not against everything I say today. But what I'm saying is we have to understand that there's this message that we're being taught that we're buying into. We need more experiences, more finances, more time, more power, more activities. More is better. And even when you look at the concept of intimacy, here's how God defines true relational intimacy between a man and a woman. God's perspective. One man and one woman that they get married and they only have sex with each other their entire lives in the context of marriage. This is what God describes as intimacy. But what does our culture tell us? Our culture says, no, that's old-fashioned. That's unrealistic. No one can do that. Our culture tells us that you want to really experience intimacy, what you need to do is explore sexuality. And you need to have sex with more people so that one day you can find the one person who you're truly sexually compatible with, and then that person maybe you'll marry if monogamy is even a real thing. I mean, we see it in every way. Our culture is saying more is better, and God, potentially what we're going to see is saying to us, no, sometimes less is better. And I don't think this tension or this message is unique to this generation. I think it's something that every culture in human history has struggled with. But I do believe that our current generation has some unique challenges, unlike any generation. Let me give you those. I think, in one hand, more stuff is just readily available. Isn't it true? I mean, we just have the ability to buy stuff. Yesterday, I was at home, and we were getting ready in the morning. My son had a soccer game. And so our whole family was getting ready to go to it. And my one son comes in, and he's run out of hair product. And so he wants to use mine. And I was, like any good dad, I was like, no, get your own, and that's my hair product. And I realized I feel like I need to hand in my man card as I say that, but I use hair product, okay. And I like shoes, all right, don't judge me. And so my son, and a lot of you are wondering, did I really tell him no? I did. I was like, no, go get something else. That's my stuff, because I was almost out of it. And so I was like, I'm almost out of hair product, and I was walking out to the car. We were getting ready, and I realized Mary was going to be just like 1 or 2 minutes behind me. She was just getting like a water bottle filled or something. I was walking out. So on my way to my vehicle, I pull my phone out. I go to Amazon, the app to Amazon. I find the hair product that I use. I added it to my cart. At the same time, I realized I had left 2 shirts that I'd been looking at already in my cart. So I was like, hey, I'll buy those 2 at the same time. I hit buy. I had to scan my thumbprint, bought it, sat down, Mary got in the vehicle, and we left. All in that moment, I was able to buy 4 different things. Some of you are trying to do the math. There was 2 different types of hair product, okay? And so I'm just pouring it all out there, vulnerable in front of all of you, okay? And so, but anyways, the thought of this is just that quick. We just can buy stuff. We can go to stores, and you go to grocery stores. It's not just one option of whatever, ketchup. There's like 47 options of ketchup. And you go to the next aisle. It's not just one option of this. There's 40 options. And so stuff is just readily available. Here's the second thing. We have the constant bombardment, I can't say that, you know what I mean, of the message through advertising. Do you know what they tell us? It used to be, just a few years ago, that the average person would see between 3,000 and 5,000 advertisements a day. And now they're saying that that number is between 5,000 and 10,000 advertisements every single day. So we are bombarded with this message. Here's a second one. Social media raises the standard. All of us, we used to have no idea what anyone else was doing. Someone would come to you and they would say, like, I just went on vacation, and you would go, oh, good for you. Like you would have they would kind of tell you about it, and you would try to use your imagination, and you're like, oh, that's cool. And then maybe they would show you pictures, like physical pictures. You guys remember those? And they'd pull them out, and you kind of look through them, but after a while, they typically weren't the best pictures, and you just kind of go through, because they had no idea what they were taking. It wasn't the digital world, and so they'd look at something and take a picture of it. And so nowadays, though, when you see a picture of someone's vacation, what you're seeing is the 47th picture they took of that one moment. They've staged it. They got the lighting correct. You guys know what I'm talking about? Where it looks like a spontaneous picture as they're looking off into the distance, and really they deleted the first 46, and they found the right one. And so what happens is we look at these pictures of other people and their social media and their posts, and we think, wow, this is what life should be like. They take a picture of a room in their house, and they take a picture and they post it. What they're not showing you is the only reason they're taking a picture of that room, it's the only clean room in their house. Everything else is dirty. And so that becomes the standard for us. And so the standard just keeps raising and raising. Some of you are like, this guy's a total jerk. All right, here's the next one. Prosperity like no other time. Do you know in our culture right now, in America, the line that we use to define poverty, so in our country, when they define that line, they say if you make this much money, you're what we would just define as poor. You are still, if you make that much money, you are still wealthier than 75% of the world. I mean, think about that. Our country, we would say you're poor. The world would say you're extravagantly rich. And then lastly, success in our culture is defined by the standard of more. And it's hard to avoid that. When someone will look at you and say you're a failure because you don't have enough, you don't have a big enough house and a nice enough car, you don't dress a certain way, it's hard to avoid that, so we get sucked into this. So as a result of this concept, the standard of more, we feel the need to use up all of our resources so that we can attain the most possible. And this is where it starts to become dangerous. I mean, it's just a logical progression. If I buy into the message that more is better, that I need more in order to be successful, what I will naturally do is spend every single resource I have to get more. I'll spend all of my money, I'll spend all of my time, all of my energy, everything I have in order to get more. And the problem with that is once we start doing that and we spend everything, we have lost the margin in our lives. And this is what this series is about. So let me take a moment and define what margin is. Margin is an amount allowed or available beyond what is actually necessary. So another way to word it is what's left over after you've done what you needed to do. So if you think about it in your finances, let's say you make $4,000 a month in finances, but you have $3,000 in bills. It's that last $1,000, that's the margin. Or let's say you have a day scheduled and you have 24 hours in a day and you have, including sleep, you have 22 hours planned. It's that 2 hours that is the margin of your life. Or even in a physical sense, if you can use your imagination, imagine at the edge of this stage right here, that over this is a cliff. And it falls down such a depth that if someone stepped off, they would die. The margin in our lives is the space that we have between where we are and the edge of that cliff. And what we logically know is that it's not healthy to go to the edge and to live here. We know this in the physical sense. How many of you have seen these videos like on YouTube, and I've seen some people post them on Facebook, these daredevil people that go like on skyscrapers and they'll take pictures where they're doing handstands and they'll do flips. Anyone seen these? I mean, they make me about hyperventilate when I watch them. I can't even get my head around them. But I think it really accurately summarizes the perspective we have in our culture, that we have learned to live on the edge. When logic would tell us that we need to step away, and the further we step away from the ledge, the further margin that we have, the safer we would be in our physical lives. Unfortunately, we don't have that same type of thought pattern when we talk about our spiritual lives and our financial lives and even the physical lives that we live. And so what this series is about, it's about the idea of challenging us to evaluate the margin in our life. Because here's what's true, and this is where it's going to keep getting more and more serious. It's not just that we buy into the mindset that more is better, and then that we spend all of our resources so that we have no margin. The truth is that we go even beyond that. And so what happens is without margin, the need for more doesn't go away, but instead leads us to borrow so that we can have more. And this is something that we're seeing that's unique to this generation, is that we are borrowing more and more and more so that we can buy more and more and more. And so some of the things that we borrow is we borrow money. We know this. And again, as I say these things, I'm not saying all these things are bad. I'm just giving some examples of how we do this. We look at a house. We don't have the money to buy that house, but we feel like we need it. So what do? We get a mortgage, and so we borrow money. And we look at cars, and we don't have the money to buy that car outright. So what do? We get a car loan. And then we look at other stuff that we want, and we don't have the money to buy it. So what do? We get credit cards. Then there's the traditional credit cards, Visa, MasterCard, American Express. But now just about every single store that you go into has a credit card. How many of you have experienced that? You go to check out and they say, if you open a card today, you can save what? 10% or 15%. And they ask you, it's always ironic to me because there's times I'm buying like $4.30 worth of stuff. Do you want to save 15%? No, I don't, not really. But every single store has a credit card. And then we have lines of credit that oftentimes is based on the equity of our home. Now, I want you to think about how ironic that is. You actually start to pay enough off on your house that you have some equity, and our culture says you need to turn around immediately and use that equity to be able to borrow more money. I mean, the whole concept of a home equity loan is really be willing and able to go to the very edge of your finances. And so what happens is as a culture, we are going more and more into debt with our finances. I was doing some study on this, and I came across this number. The average household in America, concerning credit cards, has $5,700 in debt. That's the average. And when I first read that, I was shocked by that. I thought, wow, that's a lot to have on a credit card. But as I studied it, that number is actually deceptive. Because when they did that study, what they did is they included everyone. And there are many of homes that don't have any credit cards at all. And so as you actually go into that number a little bit more, they say, actually, if you just talk to the people or do a survey of the people who actually have credit cards and you remove those that don't, the average debt that a person with a credit card has is $16,425. That's the average in our country. So what does that show us? That people who actually use credit and have credit cards, that it's not something that they use to get out of debt. It's not something they use to better their lives. Oftentimes, it leads to an unsustainable rhythm where they keep adding more and more debt. They can't make those payments, and it just gets worse and worse. In our country, for those who have mortgages, the average mortgage in our country now is $180,000. The average auto loan is $29,058. If you're going to have student loans, you just get out of school, just starting your life, the average debt for student loans is $50,868. And so if you're going to have any type of debt, the average in our country per household is $135,924 of debt. So when we see that, I think we can recognize that's not a sustainable pace. That's not a sustainable rhythm. But the truth is we don't just borrow money. We also borrow of our time and energy. And when I say that, you might think, oh, that sounds weird because time is a set thing. We can't borrow time. It's not like someone can give us more time. But here's what I mean from this, and I think you'll understand as soon as I say it. We borrow time from what is really a priority to give the things that aren't a priority in our lives. And so things that we know are important, our relationship with God, our relationship with our spouses, our relationship with our family and friends, and what God has called us to do. So often in our lives, we can't do the very things that are important to us. We can't connect to them because we're borrowing time from that to give to something else, to give to our jobs, to give toward our hobbies, to give toward even the activities of our children. And as a result, we suffer. And so we keep saying yes to things. People come to us, hey, can you do this? Yes. Even though we know in our life we don't have enough time, yes, I'll sleep less in order to say yes. I'll borrow from my sleep time to give toward that. Someone else asks us to do something. I should be spending time with my spouse, but I'll borrow from that to say yes to you and that. And my kids want to do this activity, and so we'll borrow from our family time in order to do this. And then they want to do sports on Sunday, so we're going to borrow from church time in order to do this. And this is the rhythm of our lives, and it becomes unsustainable. In Proverbs 22, the passage I had you to turn to, in verse 7, it says this: the rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. What it's simply saying is if you borrow, then the person you borrow from becomes the master of your life. And for many of us, in our lives and in our finances and in our schedules, someone or something else has become the master of our lives. For some of you, the bank is the master. The bank determines if you're happy or not. The bank determines if you can say yes or no to certain things. For some of you, it's the auto loan. For some of you, it's your student loans. For some of you, it's your hobbies, or it's your job, or it's some commitment that you've made, maybe your children's activities. And so this has become the master of your lives. So what does this mean? How does this impact us? Well, here's the first way that this impacts us: in stress. Before I even read you any statistics, can we just be honest for a moment? How many of you are stressed in your life right now? Raise your hands really high for a second. Just look around the room. The vast majority of this room is stressed in their lives. So let me read you some statistics. 77% of people regularly experience physical symptoms caused by stress, and I'll list what those are later. 73% of people regularly experience psychological symptoms caused by stress. 33% of people say they are living with extreme stress. Extreme stress. In my mind, if you're having physical reactions to stress, that would be extreme, but I think we've even defined it differently than that. So 33% say that's them. 48% feel the stress has increased over the past 5 years. How many of you feel like your life is becoming more and more stressful over the last 5 years? Yeah, a lot of us. 48% of people report lying awake at night due to stress. 48% of people say that stress has a negative impact on their personal and professional life. 31% of employed adults say that they have difficulty managing work and family responsibilities because of stress, and that causes stress. 35% cited their jobs as interfering with their family or personal time as a significant source of stress. 54% said that stress has caused them to fight with people close to them. And I think we can feel that. 26% report being alienated from a friend or family member because of stress. The annual cost to employers in stress-related health care and missed work is $300 billion. 30% of people say they are always or often under stress at work. And without giving you the statistics, this is how it's impacting people physically: fatigue, headache, upset stomach, muscle tension, change in appetite, teeth grinding, change in sex drive, feeling dizzy. And this is how it's impacting people in the psychological symptoms: irritability or anger, feeling nervous, lack of energy, feeling as though you could cry. And when you look at the reasons for stress, the vast majority, 75% of people say it has to do with money. But a lot more than that, or even a high number, 58% says relationships and other responsibilities. But we feel stress. I mean, this unsustainable rhythm that we have embraced as truth for our lives is creating stress. But here's what it's also creating. It's creating tension. Tension in relationships. Tension in our minds and in our hearts. And it's leading to fights. I mean, so often in our lives, we fight about things, and it's not even the real issue. You guys ever have those moments where you're fighting and you know it has nothing to do with what you're specifically talking about? It's just a factor in a bad mood. Anyone admit to that? I mean, I'll admit it. I'm grumpy. I get grumpy when I'm tired. I get grumpy when I'm hungry. And I get grumpy when I'm stressed. And I've had my wife. My wife is very patient, very loving. And I've had her say to me at times, what are you really upset about? And though I hate that question in the moment, it just leads me to, you know what, you're right. I'm stressed about this or that at work. And we leads to good discussions. Also, I think we have despair in our lives. Because of the stress, we just can't possibly imagine how life will get better. And so then it also leads to fear. And I'll give you one last dramatic statistic. 100% of LCC attendees cited this sermon as a cause of stress and depression. Guys are like, move on, Matt, okay? But here's the reason why this matters to me. In John 10:10, the other verse I asked you to turn to, this is Jesus talking. And Jesus says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. What Jesus is saying here is he's actually talking about Satan, and he's talking about the spiritual reality. And he goes, the truth is that Satan wants to destroy your life. He wants to kill you. He wants to steal from you. He wants to ruin your life. And people can disregard Satan as a figment of imagination, a created concept. But Jesus, who is God, who came to the earth and died and was resurrected, he says that Satan is real. And he says he's created a system to destroy your life. But then he flips it over and says, but I want you to know what I want for your life. This is Jesus talking. Jesus is like, I want you to have life. But I don't want you just to have a simple life, an okay life. I want you to have it abundantly. Another way to word it is Jesus is saying to those who follow him, he goes, I want you to have the best life possible. So here's the question. What I just described up until this point, is this the best life possible? I mean, is this what Jesus was talking about? And he's like, if you follow me, this is what you're going to experience, this life of stress and tension and frustration and despair and fear. This life where you're constantly worried about your finances and you're worried about your time schedule and you feel you're just pulling apart from your spouse and your family feels disconnected and you hate your job and you regret the job, the employment that you're living, and you never look forward to Mondays. And is that the life that Jesus wanted for us? I think we can all look at that and go, absolutely not. So the question we have is, what happens then if we take a step back? What happens if we actually start to have margin in our lives, where we start to have some space? So I want you to think for a moment, what happens in your life when you legitimately have a day off? Like a legit day off, where, I mean, you don't have anything planned in a negative sense. You don't have to do work-related stuff, and you can do just what you want to do. Whatever revives you. Go into a park, go into a movie, sleeping in, taking a nap, taking another nap, going to bed early, But what happens when you have a legitimate day off? You know what happens? You post about it on Facebook. I'm not condemning that. I want you to explain why. You post about why? Because it's so out of the normal that you're like, hey, friends, celebrate with me. I get to have a day off. Or for some of you that are married, you're like, man, me and my spouse, we haven't had a date in forever. And so we get to go out. It's going to be incredible. And the reason you post about it is it's such an abnormal thing. But what happens when that abnormal special event becomes a regular occurrence in your life? What would happen if you legitimately every single week had one day off? One day off from your responsibilities of work and stress, and you could just chill, just hang out. I know some of you hear this, you think that's impossible. I'll tell you, every single Friday of my life is my Sabbath. Every single Friday, I don't do anything work-related. And you know what? I don't say this in an arrogant way. You know my heart. I'm just as busy as any of you. I have a lot of stress, responsibilities. I have to preach every Sunday. I mean, that's just a burden that I have. So my mind is still trying to mentally engage my sermon on Friday. I won't allow it to happen. No, I'm going to relax. Why? because I believe that's the rhythm that God has established for us. So what happens in your life when you have margin with your schedule? What happens when you actually, for your spouse, when you have time for a date? Consistently. Weekly, every other week, every third week. I mean, consistently. You think your marriages would be better? What happens when you are able to spend quality time together as a family? Not some rare occasion, but where you consistently sit down and you have dinner together and you talk and you connect. You think your relationship with your kids will be better? You think the relationship amongst yourselves will be better? What happens when you have a couple $1,000s in your savings account and all your bills are paid? I mean, think about that. Would some of you, I mean, you just think about that and you think like, man, that will never happen. And initially in my notes, I was going to put $5,000 or $10,000, but I just thought some people would think, that's just too unrealistic. You know that 75% of our culture, 75% of our culture live week to week in their paychecks. What happens if you had more money in your savings? You think you would have less stress? You'd be happier? What happens when you're not running from one thing to another? You're not so stressed out, you don't owe, you're not overextended. Let me tell you what will happen. You'll have peace. You have legitimate peace in your life. You'll be able to and relax. And you know what that will lead to? It will lead to joy. You'll start to find out that the things in your life that maybe have even been causing stress will actually start to enjoy more. You'll start to enjoy your spouse more. That person that you are so frustrated with, you'll realize a lot of your frustration is in your head because you're just so stinking tired, so worn out. Your kids will be less annoying. Parents are like, what? Is that possible? You know, I love my kids, but there are times I realize my frustration is just I'm tired. I mean, I communicate, and I can hear it in my own voice. I can hear it in my tone. I'm just tired. So you'll love your kids more, and you know what? You'll love your jobs more. You'll love your coworkers more. You know what it'll do? It'll change your perspective. You'll have a healthy perspective. Being tired distorts everything. My mother-in-law, who was my English teacher growing up, I remember some of the best advice she ever gave me. I gave her a whole class, but she said, never make an important decision at night. She says, when you are tired, you do not think clearly. And there's truth, but the negative of it is, I think a lot of us are perpetually tired. We're just tired all the time, and so we're not the wisest people in the world because of it. The next thing I think you'll experience is freedom from many stresses of life. There'll still be stresses, but you'll be freedom from so many of them. The next part is you'll start to have confidence for the future. You start to think clearly, and you have some space and some rhythm and some finances, and you go, you know what? It's going to be good. It's all going to work out. And that hope will come back to you. And lastly, and very importantly, you'll have freedom to do the things God commanded you to do. See, the reason why some of you can't even walk in obedience right now is you're unable. God could tell you right now to go invest in someone's life, and you're like, I'm so messed up. I can't invest in someone else. Go and pour into this person's life. I'm too busy to do that. I'm overextended the way it is. God called you to honor him in your finances, and you're like, are you kidding me? Tithe, be generous, give to the needy. How can I do that when I'm barely making my bills every single week? I mean, this is just a rhythm. God's going to say, I want you to do this. And some of you look at his commands, you think, it's impossible. But you know what? When you start to have margin, it becomes possible. And so here's the scripture. This is the theme scripture for this entire series. Proverbs 22:3. The prudent sees danger and hides himself, but the simple go on and suffer for it. So before I explain this, I'm going to give you a little context. This was written by a man named Solomon. And Solomon was given a supernatural gift from God. Solomon was the son of David. And when he became king, he was very young, around 20 years of age. And Solomon became king, and he had some insecurity because he was young, and he didn't feel like he had the wisdom to govern. And his dad was like the Hall of Fame king. I mean, his dad was the king that they judged every other king after him from. And so Solomon had this insecurity, and God came to him and said, Solomon, what can I give you? He said, name whatever you want, and I'll give it to you. Solomon could have asked for the destruction of all of his enemies. He could have asked for a long life. He could have asked for prosperity. He could have asked for many things. But Solomon, and I love his heart. I do. It's one of my favorite scriptures. Solomon says, I need wisdom so I can govern your people well. And God was so moved by his request that God gave him all of what he didn't ask for and wisdom. So God gave him prosperity. God gave him peace. God just gave him everything. And then he said, and I'm going to make you supernaturally wise. And Solomon became so wise that the leaders from other nations would come and just sit in his presence and hear him talk because he understood things that no one else understood. Well, Solomon wrote the book of Proverbs, the wisest man besides Jesus to ever live. And he wrote the book of Proverbs, and they're just like these nuggets of truth. And in this one, he says a truth that's so simple, it's obvious, but we sometimes ignore it. And he says the prudent or the wise. In the whole book of Proverbs, it's always this contrast between the wise man or the fool. But he says the wise or the prudent, he looks up and he sees danger, but he doesn't just keep walking toward it. He doesn't look up and say, this potentially could destroy my life, and then go, well, I'm just going to try it out anyways. He says the wise man, the prudent man, looks at danger and he goes, I shouldn't go that way. He hides himself. He escapes it. He goes another direction. But he says, but the simple or the fool goes on and suffers for it. And I think this is the challenge for us. And in this series, what we're looking at, as I, as the teacher, am just holding up a mirror to us and saying, this unsustainable pattern that we've embraced in our lives, it has the potential to destroy your marriage, has the potential to destroy your family, has the potential to destroy your well-being and your peace of mind and your finances. It has the potential to ruin your life. The question is, are we going to be the wise who look at it and go, you know what? You're right. The Word of God is true. I'm going to change. I'm going to evaluate my heart, and I'm going to ask God to do the same, and I'm going to look for ways of things I need to change. But you know what? As God convicts us, the response is going to be things that we have to give up that is going to be extremely painful, extremely difficult. For the wise, it means some of you, you're going to have to quit jobs. You're going to have to change jobs. For some of you, you're going to have to downsize, sell a house, sell a car, buy something used. For some of you, you're going to have to get help. And the embarrassment that you probably feel of inviting someone else into your dysfunctional situation, say, I need your wisdom. Can you help me get out of this? For some of you, you're going to have to start saying no to things and the potential of offending people you care about. Can you do this? No. I got to say no to this activity. I got to say no to this. I got to back out of this group and this commitment that I had. For some of you as parents, the kids are going to say, hey, can I do this activity? And you're going to say, you know what? No. And your kids are going to be upset at you, and they're going to be frustrated, and you're going to have that insecurity. Oh, if I say no to them, they're going to be dysfunctional. I'm going to hurt them. I'm going to wound them, even though it's not true. And you're going to feel that insecurity. Or we're going to be like the fool. And we're going to say, you know what? I'm the exception. I'm the exception. I'm going to keep going down this path and just hope it turns out better for me. But you know what? The fool says, everything has to work out perfectly for this to be a success. I'm going to buy this house, and the only way this happens and it works out good if I hit my exact same sales marks from last year and I get that bonus and I work this overtime and nothing else breaks in my life, then it's going to be good. That's what the fool says. The wise person says, many things can go wrong and this will still be okay. That's the decisions that they make. So the challenge for us is, what are we going to be? Are we going to be the wise, the prudent, or are we going to be the simple, the fool that just keeps going down hoping that we're the exception? And the reason that this is such a priority to me, I just hope you can hear my heart. As a pastor of the church and as a leader of our staff, we consistently are sitting down with people that are hurting and struggling, and so often it's because of things that could have been avoided. Unsustainable paces. We sit down with parents who are so disconnected from their kids because for the last 10, 15 years, they've just lived at an unsustainable pace. There have been couples that come in and they haven't had time together in months, years even. And they're frustrated and they want divorce. And I look at it, and honestly, I'm a simple person. I look at it and I go, here's the obvious thing. You just don't spend enough time together. Oh, we can't. We got to do this and do that. We sit down with people who are having to declare bankruptcy because all their finances are in disarray. And we look at it, you know why? This is hard to say. Made a lot of bad decisions. A lot of bad financial decisions. And so for us, as a staff, as the pastors and leaders, we're not here to condemn. We're here to say, we want you to avoid pain. We want you to experience the life that Jesus designed you to live, life at its absolute best. But in order for it to happen, it's going to require us making difficult decisions and opening our hearts up and saying, God, show me where I need to change. And so this is what this series is about. Next week, we're going to talk about prioritizing our lives. The week after that, we're going to talk about taking stock, of really evaluating our lives in every capacity. The week after that, we're going to talk about generosity versus the more is better concept. Then the week after that, we're going to talk about creating a sustainable rhythm of rest in your life. And then lastly, we're going to talk about leaving a legacy for the next generation, what God has called us to do. The series will be powerful if we cooperate in the process. Will you bow your heads? Before I pray, I want to ask a personal question of you. How many of you know, after hearing this message, that you know you've embraced a rhythm of living that is an unsustainable rhythm, and you need God's help? Will you raise your hand? Yeah. Put your hands down. God, thank you for loving us. Thank you for, at times, holding up a mirror that exposes us and our sin. I pray that you help us to trust you in this process. Help us to have your wisdom, to trust that you're not trying to hurt us or wound us or withhold anything good from us, but you have actually designed us to live differently. Help us to embrace that truth and to apply it to our lives. And I pray through this week as we connect in relationships that we will encourage and support each other. And God, we love you and give you all the glory and pray this in your name. Amen.